I think when you're trying to find a manager, if you're an artist that doesn't have one, like having as much ammo in place as possible to make their lift lighter, like how much work do you expect them to do? No one's going to care about your project as much as you. Like you need to bring as much to the table as possible. Like I was doing my own graphic design. Like I have a proper logo and EPK and everything built to be like, hey, like here's like all the marketing assets you need to go pitch into a club. Like I've got one of my buddies in Toronto who's a videographer to make like a hype reel of everything I was doing. So it's not like I just had a couple good SoundCloud songs and then expected him to do everything else.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Headliner Mindset Podcast. Today's guest is on a mission to bring back the golden era of dance music. After getting picked up by Kygo's management team and record label, he's been touring nonstop, playing festivals and shows all over the world, getting tens of millions of streams on Spotify, and just recently dropping his debut full-length album. This is Frank Walker. My man, welcome to the show. So stoked to have you here. Very, very excited to dig in to learning a bit about the world of Frank Walker and who you are and what you're up to. So welcome to the Headliner Mindset Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to share the Frank Walker world. Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on.
So, I was poking around. I was reading some articles. First off, I always like to shout out kind of how I get connected with my artists. Shout out David Rishti, who runs Palm Tree Records. We just did an episode a couple months ago. Really great episode. Palm Tree Records is Kygo's record label, and he was so rad to kind of peel back the curtains and tell us a lot about, what it looks like to run a record label. So really great episode to check out. But you're one of the artists that's on the Palm Tree Records label and part of that camp and that operation as well. So, shout out David. Now,
we love Dave.
We love Dave. Shout out Dave, the man. Now, as I was digging into your music and reading up on you, the first thing that stood out that I really love, that's kind of, it's like part of your brand or part of your slogan to a certain extent, is bringing it back to the golden era.
Yeah.
Tell me what the golden era is, because this is exciting for me.
So depending on when you got into dance music, this probably differs for different people. But for me, it's like, I don't know, I dropped my debut album earlier this year. And when I was going back through, like thinking about like, what do I want this to mean to me, it kind of circled back to like that golden era of dance music for me when like I first fell in love with it. You had like Avicii, Alesso, Swedish House Mafia, like all these amazing artists making super melodic stuff that kind of crossed over from being underground into like pop realm, I guess, kind of, when you have these amazing vocalists hopping on tracks. And I think for me, it was an intersection of two different genres that I really love. Because I love a good like folk song or an alternative song or like a good ballad. And like I think the way you're able to meld those two together, it was super inspirational for me and made me fall in love with the genre. And first as kind of like a listener, then like a hobbyist DJ, and then more seriously as a DJ, then as a producer, and then years later here I am. So yeah, the golden era for me is that kind of like 2013 to 2015 dance.
Oh, yeah. Well, I 100% agree. That was the golden era. That was my favorite. Avicii will forever be my number one favorite artist. I started going out in 2009, I think, was my first rave. And so 2010, it was like Swedish House Mafia's One. Avicii, was just starting to pop off. It was a special time, man, and there was something happening back then that doesn't seem to happen as much. I think it is a little bit of, like you said, kind of like that crossover where it still is very much. Yeah, it's big room electronic music, big fucking chords and melodies, but also bringing in these really beautiful vocals, and it's kind of seemed like it shifted away from that for a little bit. So it's really cool to see you, bringing that back, but in like a modern way as well, like a 2024 version of it.
Yeah, and I definitely think I picked up, like, 'cause I've been producing now for like 7 years or so. I've definitely picked up other techniques and collabed with a bunch of other people over the years, and like you learn different little techniques from people. Being on the road with, I'm not only with Kygo's label, but I'm also like same management teams. I've opened for Kygo a ton, and definitely some like tropical influence and stuff I've been doing. But yeah, for me, it's more like the emotion behind that stuff that really like is what I wanted to kind of emulate. And like on the album, there's quite a few big like anthemic kind of sounding dance tracks, but also some stuff that's a bit more mellow. But like always comes back to the kind of like that that emotion that I think that some modern dance music's lacking a bit. And everything's cyclical. Like
Yeah.
some people want to go out and party to techno music, and that's totally cool. Like I've been at raves before and I have fun there, but for me, it just doesn't feel as like fulfilling to write that. Like I'd like something that like I can listen back to in 10 years. And like those Avicii songs, like if you listen to Wake Me
Yeah.
Up, like everyone still sings it. Like
Oh yeah.
it's not like
Timeless.
it's like gonna ever go, it's never gonna go like expire, you know? It's like it's one of those
Yeah.
things where like a good song is always gonna be a good song and people can listen to it for forever. Opposed to like maybe
Yeah.
in a few years a techno track might not be as like, I don't know, might be a bit more disposable unless like there's amazing lyrics. And like you have someone like a John Summit who's putting amazing lyrics on like kind of more techno tracks or progressive house tracks. And I think those ones will stand the test of time. And that there's like, it's not saying that you can't have those moments in other genres.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting to think about that because there is a difference between writing songs, like songs, versus almost like DJ ammo, you know,
Yeah.
where I think in some genres, like I see some house artists where they're putting out like 20 songs a year, you know,
Yeah.
and just they're just like boom, boom, boom. Like there's this almost like rushed process and you know, maybe, you know, techno house, some of these things. And that's because it's like, well, as a DJ, you're DJing a couple times a week. Like you always need new music, right? Like part of that sort of DJ culture is like we're playing fresh shit all the time. So it's kind of like you're always searching for the next thing versus when you're like, hey, I'm trying to write a song that's still going to be here in 5 years or 10 years, right? It's a bit of a different creative process.
And there's something to be said about like that other like mentality too, where it's like you want to be pushing the limit and be the first one to find new stuff and make crazy VIP edits that no one else has. And like, not to say like when I play my sets, like they always goes back to like the core of it being melodic, but like, there are moments where it's like I'm making a VIP edit for like say I'm playing Ultra and it's like I'll make a drop and I'm like, this is like I'll make it. I'm like, this is like honestly kind of annoying, but like it'll work really well live because it just like hits you and it's like that moment. But like not something I would listen to if I'm like chilling, like trying to like just listen for like the sake of listening, you know? So I think there's music that can serve all different purposes, but
and that's where I really break down the difference between being an artist, being a producer, and being a DJ. Like those are all, from my opinion, those are all different skill sets. It's like an artist is like you're really tapping into your soul and your emotion and you're expressing yourself and you're exploring and playing and breaking rules. Being a producer is like you understand the math and science and the formula of how music is made and kind of what works. And then being a DJ is different as well. You know, it reminds me of I started my career at Capitol Records as like a publicist assistant, and at that time we had signed David Guetta. This was like this is 2009 or 2008, I think. So like right before shit popped. I remember having a conversation with Guetta. He's making all of these like, you know, kind of crossover hits and radio hits. Like he was like kind of one of the first ones to start bringing like dance music into pop music, into hip hop music, and that shit was getting played on the radio. So he's blowing up for these songs. And I remember him telling me, he's like, I don't get it. You know, I come out here to play these raves and these shows and I'm playing my songs and like basically like it's not working. And it's like, well, yeah, because people are coming to the show to fucking party. You know, like I remember him having this moment of like seeing the light bulb go off in his head where he was like, oh shit, I can't just play like the radio stuff. I gotta make edits. I gotta change these songs in a way to make them partyable. You know, it's like back then, like it hadn't really happened yet. Like there wasn't this sort of crossover yet. So it's I think it's an important thing for artists to realize of like there is that difference of like, okay, when you're DJing, you know, how are you going to actually really make shit for the crowd, perform for the crowd, right?
Yeah, and I think that still kind of exists. Like because my songs are kind of like ballady and like the original, like I like making sappy music. So like unless one is like really popped off on radio or streaming, it's hard for me to play them out, and I need to make edits and mash them up with either like a track that people know or like make quick edits to get them in there to start teasing it out so people get exposed to it more. But it's also a fine line because I have these songs that people love, and if I don't play them, I get like not angry DMs. And people's like, "Oh, I'm so disappointed. Like I wanted to hear my favorite song," and I'm like, "Oh, I fucked up. Like like this person really loves this song." So it's tough, and like especially when you're reading the room, and it's like you have like a certain amount of set time, and it's like you'll like my tour manager Blaze is like, "Hey, you got like 15 minutes left." I'm like, "Oh, like I need to get a few things in that I haven't played yet, but I also like can't just have the last 15 minutes be like the downer 15-minute section." So that's such a big skill, I think, as like the DJ is obviously reading the room, but like then you have to navigate that artist portion that comes in as well and be like, hey, how do I strike the balance where I'm like maintaining that artistic integrity, but also like playing to the room. Because like sometimes I go to a
Yeah.
club and it's like people want it like dark and heavy and techy, and that's like
Yeah.
not really what my brand is becoming, and like not what I like love to play. And like because of that, like my repertoire of that stuff isn't as like pushing the limits in that area. So
Mm.
sometimes it's like, hey, how do you like give them a little bit of what they want, but then like bring it back to where I want it to be for myself and kind of like guide the crowd back to like where I want them to be, and to also like kind of maintain that sound
Yeah.
that I want to become known for. So definitely like
Yeah.
I sympathize when you say like another artists have to go through that issue. Like, hey, how do I balance being an artist with a DJ? Then like I think you do those two live and then you bring it back to being a producer. And it's like, how do I make stuff that kind of makes everything cohesive when you're back home sitting in the studio?
Yeah. It's a fucking juggling act, man. It really sounds like you got all these different balls you're trying to juggle at the same time. I would imagine when it comes to DJing, because it's like you're gonna have people that come that are just, they probably don't even know who you are. They're like, we're going to the club tonight and someone's playing and we're just going out to party. And there's the kind of club kids that maybe just want to party. But then you're also
Definitely.
going to have people that are there that are like, I bought tickets to see this artist because I like his song and I play this fucking song on my Spotify every day and I want him to play that song, like actual fans. And
Definitely.
so how do you know? Well, I imagine it would probably be, part of it would probably be if you're playing maybe like a hard ticket show versus like a club show, would be probably an easy way to tell like what is that portion and percentage of people that are just kind of there to party versus there that are actual fans. Like how do you find that balance of kind of knowing where to lean?
I think it depends like on like there's a couple answers. I think it depends on like the market you're playing. Like this weekend at Marquee, like it's more of like a touristy city, New York, and people go out and want to party and like they're there as like a destination. Obviously, like regular club goers, and I've got fans in New York that'll be out to see me perform. But like when you're in like a Miami, a Vegas, and New York, like you have a lot of these like kind of bottle service clubs that have a lot of clientele that are coming out that just want to be there to party. So
Yeah.
like you always have like your crowd pleasers you throw in, and then I try to like squeeze my main like Frank Walker songs in between those to kind of like have them fit a vibe where it's like, hey, like I just heard like David Guetta Titanium and like I love that, it's a banger, and it's like, oh, like one of my songs is the same key, so it's like right and the energy's high, like then I try to squeeze it in, have a nice little moment, bring it back to stuff they might know. Pose like there's some music markets that are just like really good music markets. Like there's something about Colorado, like the people there just like are down to listen to whatever. So I feel like you go there and you have it
Yeah.
more like carte blanche to play whatever you want. And like they're way more like I think music fans there. Not saying that there aren't people like that in like New York or Miami. Like Miami has an amazing house scene as well, but it depends
Yeah.
on the venue you're at. And because I think I make more
Yeah.
commercial music, I get in more commercial venues where it's like if I go to live, maybe half the crowd's there to see me, but half the crowd's there because they're on
Yeah.
vacation and like just want to like been partying all day and want to come out. So I think it's like partly reading the room and being prepared for that. Like if I'm have a 2 hour set, I'll come in with like 5 or 6 hours of music, and I always have like my core where like I start and like moments I want to hit in the middle, and then I'll kind of like deviate in the middle of that. But like, oh, hey, like they're like the darker stuff. I'm like for this whole 10-minute block, I'm gonna maybe go a bit more like darker, make it a bit heavier, bring it back up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like I think that's a reading the room and just having the repertoire to read the room. Like there's a lot of people that can be playing a DJ set that's like, oh no, I'm tanking, but like I don't know where to go. And I think that's this having come with having toured now for like 7 years and probably played like 500 shows. Like if people want a throwback section, like I've got that. If people want it like this way, I got that. Like I think it's like A, learning how to read, and B, just having the repertoire ready to read and getting thrown into situations. And I'm not saying I've never
Yeah.
tanked before, but you live and you learn. It's like maybe I should have a set like this
Yeah.
ready for next time this happens. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm really excited to go deeper into this because I actually just bought a, what is it? Pioneer DJ XM RX3 controller. I got my first DJ controller. What happened was
nice.
I had 2 days in a row, I had people come up to me here in Austin and say, "Hey Nick, like, do you want to DJ this party?" Like my friend was having a birthday. He's like, "Oh, you want to DJ?" And then the next day, someone else was like, "Hey, we have this event. You want to DJ?" And I was like, "I don't DJ. I work with hella DJs." So people just assume, they just thought, "Oh, you obviously know how to DJ. You work with all these DJs." No, I don't. I don't. I mean, I have years and years ago. I know maybe the basics, but it was like this sign from the universe. I was like, fuck, I think it's time. I think it's time. I need to just be able to have a USB, plug in, throw down a set. So I'm at the very beginning of just learning. Now I'm really curious as you talk about having these two important things. One, the repertoire. Because I'm just in the process where I'm like, I gotta download hella music. I'm like, okay, I'm just beginning. Like, all right, I gotta just spend fucking hours downloading music, setting my cue points in Record Box, and also
that
like,
never stops. Like I still like even though I have big repertoire, you still got to keep digging and finding those things.
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah,
I cut you off there.
No,
what's 100%. The next problem you have?
Well, yeah, like, crate digging, right? Just fucking crate digging. And that's exciting to me. That's a fun part of it. But also, like, I've never DJ'd before. So the other part that you really talk about is reading the room. And I hear that term all the time. And obviously, anyone that's out there that actually is DJing, there is this reality of, reading the room. So how do you actually read the room? What are you looking for? What are the nuances that you're paying attention to? Like, how do you know when to shift and where to go? Let's dig into that a little bit.
It's a tricky one. Before I jump in, like I think when like you're at the phase where you're playing house parties is like the most fun because there's no expectations. You can mess around and mess up, and if you're with all your friends, like there's nothing better than that.
Yeah,
and like even for me too, like some of my buddies own bars in Toronto, or like I'll like if I'm around someone like hey, or like the DJ's like I'll hop on for half an hour, and it's like when there's no expectations, those are the most fun. So enjoy it while you can.
Thank you. I plan on staying there. I don't plan on going beyond that. My goal is to play a fucking pool party with the homies or a house party. Like that's literally it.
No, it's a lot of fun. It kind of like depends. Like after touring enough, you eventually start to get a sense of like what rooms are gonna want what. But yeah, for me, it's like I always have like kind of my intro. Like I always start off with one of my tracks, kind of like break it down, build up some epic little intro bit. We have like visuals time coded to make it kind of like a statement, like I'm coming on. Then around like 5 or 10 minutes in is when I'll start to like be like, hey, where do I want to jump around in this? It can be tough to read, like sometimes. Like typically I'll look like right in front. There's like a good core of people in front of the dance floor, like in front of the DJ booth. Like I feel like those are like the real ones that are there to like actually party. So if they're getting down, I'll kind of look what they're reacting to and seeing like kind of what genres they want. Then to kind of expand out from there, look around the room more. Like if like typically table service people like want commercial like vocal stuff. So. But it depends on the club. Like they can get a bit darker as well. But I think like that core group in front, kind of like looking at when like what they want to do, like the real people in the dance floor who are like they're riding the rail or something. Like they're like the real dance fans. If they're like if I can throw something in there that they love, that's always like the best thing for me. And then kind of just like seeing if the energy's high. Like I'll have times where it's like there's like I have a massive song like not to go back to Get Up, like a Titanium, but like if the energy is super super hype and like. You don't want to kill the energy too fast with a big like kind of melodic breakdown. So it's like, okay, sometimes I'll jump ahead, and be like, hey, like everyone's like ripping it on the dance floor right now. Let's like jump ahead throw a couple more bangers in there, and I can like circle back to play like the big melodic moments when maybe the energy is like people look like they need a bit of a breath, or like you want like a big kind of euphoric moment for people to sing along to. There's really no like template to it, and I think after a while you kind of feel it out, and you kind of get a sense of where stuff's heading, and that also probably comes from being a dance music fan, being like, oh, like I don't know, maybe like this is the right time to have a super super like nostalgic vocal moment in the set, and like kind of bring people back and rebuild it back up to like have those kind of peaks and valleys in your set to have the energy flow. Because also like if you want a heavy, you can't do that for 2 hours straight because eventually they burn out. And
for sure. What about when you're playing a festival? Is that pretty like locked in and planned out? Like I got this hour, like a festival's kind of a different, you're not playing a nightclub. It's a totally different experience. Will you have that pretty locked in, or will you also kind of read, like, would you maybe pivot in the middle of like a festival set also?
For the most part, it's locked in. Like I'm not saying I haven't pivoted before, but that typically means like something is going wrong, or like I read the vibe going into it really wrong. But I feel like that's more where you become more the artist than the DJ, and like you have to like you make these moments around more of your songs, like, and also there's like I feel like if you're at a dance festival specifically, like you're trying to like expose yourself to fans, not in like a inappropriate way. But like still like hey, like if they're dance music fans, like hey, like these are Frank Walker songs that like maybe you haven't heard before, but I want to try to win you over, and then you layer in like. We put a lot of time and effort into making my live visuals, and typically live like stage moments are really good like mediums for that. So it's like we try to get time coded moments in. So that's where like there's a feed coming out from the CDJ to front of house, and they can see what I'm playing and they can see where it is on the beat grid. and then they can sync up if they're prepped ahead of time. They can sync up like my visuals. So when there's a big boom in the song, like you have a strobe hit or something. So
Yeah.
you kind of have to. They can see a little bit ahead. Like if there's 4 decks, they can see what 4 songs I have loaded up. But you kind of have. They kind of have to have like a bit of an idea, so you're not throwing them off to have those kind of time coded moments. Then you layer in like special effects, like because you have like a certain amount of CO2 or flames, or like maybe 1 or 2 big pyro shots, and you want to make sure like your team knows when that's coming to like make sure like the SFX guy is ready to fire, like tour manager can queue him up, like photographer needs to be say it's like a good like shot. You want your photographer to be front of house to get a moment.
So much more that you're thinking about to really nail on those.
Yeah, and I think that's when you become more of like the producer or artist side, because like I'm like, hey, like, I'm going to produce like a really sick festival moment here and make a special edit of my track. Yeah, so it's like tough, and like as you play more festivals, you kind of get you get a feeling like everyone grows as an artist, and you kind of know a bit more. And then you can also layer in like bring out singers, like for Ultra this year we brought out 2 different singers, like my friend Tyler Shaw and
Cool.
and my buddy Josh Breaks from Scotland. So it's like we like flew these singers out. It's like they obviously have to know when they need to be up on stage, have their mic packs ready to go, like line checks all done. Because it's like typically on these big festivals, you don't get a lot of time to mic check beforehand. So it's like it's kind of being done on the fly. So my tour manager probably is pulling his hair out, but we always get it done. But like for that too, then you need to plan out special moments. So you're making your performers cut of your songs, like you're getting rid of the lead vocal, it's all backing vocals, or like just whatever harmonies you want in. So you kind of work through it with the singer ahead of time to make sure everything's good there. So festivals definitely need to be more kind of like rigidly planned if you're on like a main stage. Not saying like I'm
Yeah.
playing Breakaway coming up in 2 weeks, and that's I'm on like the launch pad there, which is like more like the ravey side stage, and that'll be more of like a read the room kind of situation. And like that being said, because it's a side stage, like the visuals are like they're kind of more sporadic screens, like with CO2 but shoots into the crowd and stuff. So it can be a bit more
Yeah.
free flow and fun. And I don't know. I'm also
Okay.
looking forward to that because you get to read the room a little bit and like
Yeah.
maybe throw something in there that's all left field that like I wouldn't expect to play, but like it's happening. Bucket, like throw it in, and sometimes you get a good reaction, sometimes you get a bad, but that's what keeps it fun.
Yeah. I like what you pointed out about how playing a festival is a little bit more of an artist showcase. I haven't really thought about that before, as opposed to like if you're playing a club, a nightclub, it's like, yeah, you're kind of there as a hired service to make sure that the people at the club are having fun. And like, yeah, like, maybe you're going to cater a little bit differently towards a particular market if it's a VIP, vibe or whatever. Whereas playing a festival, it's like, that is your moment to sort of show like, hey, this is who I am and how I throw down, and people are probably seeing you on the lineup of like, oh, let's go check out this artist. I can see how there's like a kind of a shift there of it being more of, yeah, I like that idea. It's kind of like an artist showcase. So that makes sense.
Definitely. And like there's also like I don't know, I was on Threads the other day. I don't know who still uses Threads, but I was looking at one of my buddies, DLMT, arguing with someone else who's like, I think it's like one of those mashup like turntablist DJs that got booked for I forget who it was. But he was playing some like big festival and like did some like mashup routine and dropped into a weird drum and bass track, and like the crowd just didn't have any reaction. And he like posted a video of the crowd not reacting to his mashup, saying like, I don't care who you are, like if you're not getting down to this, you're not the crowd for like you don't know good music. He's pretty much calling out the crowd. My buddy's like, this is on you. Like at some point,
Yeah.
at some point you need to be yourself, but also like I don't know, if you're like heads up your ass and it's like, oh, like if you don't like this and you're not like a real dance music fan, like you should be able to at least like move like a little bit in your set. And like you're not saying like obviously it's a little genre dependent, but like I've seen, back to John Summit, like I've seen him play like fun mashup house edits where it's like stuff like that you get like I saw him play a private party for like a room that's probably predominantly people in like their late 30s 40s, and like he had them moving, but he can also throw down like a hard techno set where it's like it's staying within his lane, but you also like that's the way of like reading the room in that lane. For me, it's like if I'm playing an older like a private party or an older crowd, like I'm playing a lot of throwbacks, and then you can always throw some of those in to get like to feed the crowd a little bit what they want, like kind of bite them in, then bring them back on the journey. And I think that's also reading the room.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of like reading and adjusting within your lane. I think you need to kind of like you need to be there for the crowd though. Like if the crowd's not having fun, like why are you doing what you're doing? Like if you want to just play just for
100%.
yourself, stay home in your bedroom and
Yeah.
just play it for yourself. Like everyone should be having a good time, not people just staring at you being like, what the fuck is this guy doing up on stage?
100%. I agree. I talk about that a lot, where it's like understanding, like, especially if like you've been paid to show up and entertain, you're being hired to provide a service, and the goal should be, to rock this fucking crowd. And a good DJ is going to know, like you said, how to read the room and how to have the right bank of tracks to know where to go. Of like, okay, cool. Like drum and bass didn't work. That's on me. My bad. Like, let's fucking go over here. Don't get mad at the crowd if they're not rocking with you. That I think that is your job. That's what a good DJ is going to do. A good DJ isn't just about, oh, I know how to mix tracks together. And believe me, I love the art. Like I'm fucking around with like trying to chop up heavy metal and like mix. Like I'm a big metalhead. I'm trying to learn that, and I want to learn how to be one of those DJs that can like really like chop shit up in the art of DJing. That's cool. But at the same time, I think when we're talking more about, playing festivals and all that, it's like the real talent of a DJ is, can you entertain the crowd? And that should be your goal, and do whatever you have to do in order to do that, right? So, yeah. Cool. Well, look, we've talked a lot about DJing so far, and I want to shift into really talking about Frank Walker as an artist, as a music producer, as a songwriter. So take me back a little bit to like where this all began for you. When did you start making music, and how did you get into all of this in the first place?
It's like I never really thought I'd be doing what I'm doing. Like I always loved music growing up. We kind of touched earlier on like how when I fell into dance music, but before that, like my parents always like had music around me, like not what we typically would have. Like my dad like always was playing like Elton John. My mom loved like kind of country and folk stuff. I've always appreciated music of every kind of genre. Went to like an art school growing up, but kind of hated it. Like I played trombone because I think it was the easiest to cheat off of and like look at the person's slide position next to me. Never thought anything would come from it. Like did a couple piano lessons through like middle school. Yeah, and then kind of like music kind of took a back seat in my life for a bit. Finished high school. I went to university in Toronto. Did like I got my business degree. But while we were doing that, I think that's like that would have been around the same time when like we were talking about like that 2011, 2012, and Avicii was starting to blow up. And I was like lucky enough to be at a school like kind of like this pocket outside of Toronto where a few of these schools had like a bunch of really like up and coming promoters who were booking these artists like Calvin Harris and Avicii and like getting them for like cheap, like booking them for like $2,000, $3,000 because these artists hadn't popped yet. And they're like playing in Toronto. It's like, hey, like it's an hour drive, come play here. We'll throw you some extra cash to play like another party. So I got really lucky getting exposed to those things when I was in university. At the same time, I was playing rugby for my university. Our team was not very good.
Wait. Hold up. What position did you play? We got to connect on the rugby pitch real quick. I was a longtime rugby player as well.
Oh, nice. I played like club rugby growing up a bunch. So I played flanker for my club, and I was like a small-ish flanker, but like quick.
Yeah.
And then I went to university, and they moved me to wing, and that was like from one of the most fun positions to a really boring position. And like, I don't know, it's like it just wasn't like it made me kind of like fall out of love with the game a bit, and our team wasn't good, and I'm getting my ass kicked, and I'm like, it's like kind of like I'm not going to become a pro rugby player. Let's focus on school. But like at the same time, we were throwing like fun house parties with the rugby team and the football team and all the teams like with all the varsity teams would like throw parties together. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to start DJing for fun. At the time, I had like a $400 tractor controller, kind of messing around with my laptop in a garage. And I'm like, this is way more fun than losing games every weekend. Let's see where this goes. And then like started playing bigger like house parties and keggers. And that's how I kind of met that friend group where all the promoters in town, started playing some local bars, started opening for bigger artists. And like through meeting bigger artists, kind of like found some good mentors along the way, started producing some horrible music because I didn't really know what I was doing. Because like I had like a musical background, like knew like what I wanted stuff melodically to sound like, but like didn't know any production stuff. And like I'd go to my buddy Glenn, I'm like, what's this like noise? He's like, that's white noise. It's like, here's how you make it. So I knew what I wanted it to sound like, but couldn't really do it. Fast forward a few years where I like graduated, was DJing in Toronto on weekends for fun, producing as a hobby, and kind of like I forget how like the conversation came up. I was talking to my mom, and she's like, "What do you want to do?" And I'm like, "She's like, you're DJing a lot, like you're like literally like staying up late Friday, Saturday, playing shows, driving around Ontario, like coming back to the office on a Monday, and like I can tell you're exhausted." And she's like, "If you really want to do this, like you need to give this a shot. Well, like you can, like if like go give it a shot for a year." She's like, you can't start DJing when you're like 40 or 50. And like, not saying you can, because she's all like Tiesto and Guetta and Armin and all these guys are doing it, but like they didn't start when they're 40 or 50. It's hard to get into it when you're that age. So I kind of like gave it a shot, took the production more seriously, took a step away from like corporate life fully, opposed to like trying to like give 50% to both.
You just went all in.
Kind of got us to where we are today. Like I met my manager Miles, who at the time had Kygo. He was down in Miami. Like literally, like we got connected through some family friends who like my mom's friend knew his mom and like heard that he was looking for another artist. So like I flew from Toronto down to Miami for a meeting, kind of chilled with him for a day, kind of like figuring out what I wanted the vibe to be. And like we kind of liked that spot. Flew back to Toronto the next day, which is a Thursday. And he sends me like another text like, hey man, like really love meeting you. Like, I just want to make sure we vibe on a friend level more. Like me and my friends are all going to Orlando for like to go to like Halloween horror nights this weekend. You should come with us. And I'm like, I just flew back home. So like got back on a flight down to Miami again. Went and like hung out with him for a couple days. And then like on Monday he sent over a contract. And that's kind of when it became like
Oh damn.
taking it to the next level. And like he's like, hey, like we all get along. If we're gonna do this, like Kygo's working on an album. I have 4 or 5 months to like develop a new artist act out.
Yeah.
And up to that point, I had music out. Like I'd put out a couple songs out, but self-releasing. They're doing okay in Canada.
Yeah.
Kind of self-booking my tour. But that's when it kind of like, okay, we're starting to build a team around me and like put proper, like get an agent, get everything in place to like make this a business and not just like me being a hobbyist trying to figure it out as I go.
Yeah. So I want to ask about that. First, though, I want to shout out rugby because it was the rugby parties that started the DJ culture for you, the DJ journey for you, which is so rad. Because for me, it was just going to parties in high school. All the rugby parties were like the coolest, wildest, funnest parties. And then I ended up, I'm like, I want to hang out with these guys. And so that brought me into playing the sport. But shout out to fucking rugby and rugby parties because that's a good
I love
time.
it.
And cool
I
to
miss
see
the
that that's
sport
part of
so
your
much.
part of your journey and your history.
Yeah. I miss the sport so much. My body's just too broken from like
Oh yeah.
A playing and now B sitting on planes so much. I feel like I couldn't even play touch. I feel like my knees would explode. But like even through that, like I billeted like 2 Scottish players from my club team over the summer one summer, and they came and lived with me for 2 months. Like they were showing me pendulum and like drum and bass because like it's obviously a way different music culture in Europe. And like
sick.
I like this would have been back when I was in like maybe high school or first year university. Like they're like showing me pendulum back before like pendulum had like any even like real like exposure outside of the UK. So yeah, definitely like in a weird way, like got my foot in like the door in a weird way.
It's woven into that, and it's funny. It makes sense because you're from Canada. In high school, you know, like you guys don't play American football, where we
do, you know, but not well.
Yeah, and not like it's not as big, at least from my perception, you know, because we would fly in high school. We would go up there for spring break, and we would stay with Canadian teams, and we would do a tour up there. And then vice versa. The Canadian teams would come down and they would stay with us once a year too. And so we'd have that. It's like a cool way to bring different countries together. You know, that's what a beautiful thing about the sport is, I think, is it's the sportsmanship and the connection and the camaraderie is unlike anything else. So really cool to see that, like, that was a part of your history and your story there.
Yeah, definitely. It's like a huge part of it. That's good. But don't need to go too deep on the sports. Path. It's such a fun part of my life that I missed.
Yeah. And so, you know, you got to meet Miles, Kygo's manager. They decided to bring you on board, take a chance on you. What do you think it was about you that, because that's such an awesome opportunity. And I think that's so many people's dreams, is like to get in with a dope manager that knows what they're doing, that has the connections. What was it about you that had him say yes?
I think it was the fact that like he saw what I think it's a few things. I think the fact that I came from like that business background first, like I kind of like had a lot of structure in place, and I wasn't just like making music and throwing it up on SoundCloud. Like I was already running some of my own marketing campaigns and like trying to fan gate some remixes and build a fan base and like stuff that I wasn't necessarily doing properly. But he saw that like there was at least some kind of potential in the way there, and that I'd had some success on my own, like not by any means impressive, but like I had a song that like I put out like self-release like through my own like kind of record label that is I opened just to, like release my own stuff and distribute, and like had a song that in Canada did like 2 million streams without any help whatsoever. So I think he saw the potential there, and it's like kind of the drive that I had, and like with limited resources that I had too. And I think when I started working with them, I was able to level up like the songwriters I was working with and getting access to better demos and proper big remix opportunities. And I don't know, like I was touring all around Ontario and sometimes like around all Canada, a couple shows in the States without like having a real agent, just like self-booking and stuff. So I think when you're trying to find a manager, if you're an artist that doesn't have one, like having as much ammo in place as possible to make their lift lighter. Like there's a bunch of amazing artists, but it's like, hey, like I'm looking for a manager. It's like, well, it's like, how much work do you expect them to do? It's like, no one's as amazing as Miles and the rest of the team is, like no one's going to care about your project as much as you. Like you need to bring as much to the table as possible. And for me, like I was doing my own graphic design. Like I had like a proper logo and EPK and everything built to like be like, hey, like here's like all the marketing assets you need to go pitch into a club. Like I've like got one of my buddies in Toronto who's a videographer to make like a hype reel of everything I was doing. So it's not like I just had a couple like good SoundCloud songs and then kind of like expected him to do everything else.
Yeah.
On the other end, Kygo, who's an amazing, amazing, talented artist and like pioneered a genre, he just had SoundCloud remixes out, and because he was such an amazing artist, Miles found him and kind of DM'd him saying like, hey, like we need to work together. So not to say it can happen that way, but unless you're like a generational kind of
Yeah.
talent who's going to make a genre, like I think the more you can prove the value that you can provide, the better. And same thing with like club owners and stuff. It's like as good as your music is, like if you go, it's like, hey, like here's like my following, and not that's all about the following, but it's like, hey, here's my following. It's like, hey, like we're down to do ticketing giveaways or fan meet and greets, or like we'll do shout outs for the show and like we'll engage with stuff. It's like everyone, I don't think people like to like work necessarily as much as they have
Yeah.
to. So it's like if you're like willing to prove it, it's like, hey, like I'm willing to like grind it out and like bust my ass to make sure the show sells well, not just been like, hey, I'll throw up a flyer on my Instagram story. And sometimes that's enough. If you've been doing market enough, people know you're there and they're hyped. But like if you're going to a new market, like and the promoter doesn't know you, you got to be like, hey, like I'm gonna hustle on my end to get this done and get it across the line and make sure the show's gonna be good.
Yeah. This is such an important thing for people to hear, because I think a lot of artists are like waiting for the manager to come and then make them famous and like do all the work, or they're waiting for the promoter to book them so that then they can walk into a club full of people. And it's like, you got to take ownership for your career and for your life. You know, like you said, nobody's going to work as hard as you do. So you can't be waiting for other people. Also, even from that perspective, it's like, who's a manager rather going to want to work with? Let's say they have all these artists to choose from. It's like, well, this dude he's already doing everything. They're going 100%, doing everything they possibly can. It sounds like there really was a business mindset. Like you were learning the business, you were doing everything you possibly could in your own power. And I think that's just like the right kind of attitude, is like, I'm going to do this with or without you. Do you want to get on board and help me? Right? Like, I know that I'm actually steering the ship. And even like the perspective shift of, I think, having a manager, it's like you can see yourself as like, I'm on this roster and they're going to carry me to success, or I'm steering my own ship and I'm partnering with people that are going to help me get there, right? Like really having that sense of ownership. And I think that that's just a message that some people really do need to hear, right? It's like, that's the kind of person that a manager is going to want to work with in the first place. But also like, yeah, you gotta get some of that momentum going on your own. If you're kind of at ground zero and you're not taking ownership, learning these things yourself, you know, at the end of the day, you are your own manager, right? Like it's almost like you're getting a co-manager, but like you're never not going to be your own manager also. So I love to hear that. And it's no surprise that he picked you up, you know, because you were already grinding, working your ass off, running your own marketing campaigns. Like, you know, it's like it's helping a successful person become more successful is different than helping somebody who's not really doing anything yet become successful. You got to do that first portion of the work yourself, I think, in most cases. Every now and then, maybe there's a Kygo one out of 1,000. You invented a new genre and you just get plucked out and somebody, you know, makes it all happen for you, but that's very rare.
Yeah, and I think there's like also like there's a timing aspect. Like, I guess like two kind of points off that. Like there's the timing aspect where it's like it's not like Miles was the only manager I talked to. Like I was trying to find other managers and talking around, and like there's like a lot of like it's not like the right time, but they love their music kind of thing, or like it needs to be the perfect storm. Like with Miles, he was working with Thomas Jack, but Thomas was kind of like wanting to re-envision himself as like what genre he wanted to be in, and took a step back from music. So that's kind of like when I had that conversation with Miles, like, hey, we have like 4 or 5 months while I have like a gap on this roster. Like Thomas is stepping away for a little bit. Kygo's working on an album. I need something to do for 4 months. Like it was like a right time situation. Like I have a bunch of other managers who like I'm good friends with in Toronto. Like my buddy Josh Sherman manages Dubs and Borges, a bunch of other artists at the time. And like we're close family friends and we talk to each other. And I'm like, hey, like let's see what we can do here. And he's like, it's great, but I'm just like, I'm overworked. Like I don't have the time to try to like to bring it on right now. And then like I think it goes back to like having as much in line as possible, and I don't think that ever like really stops. Like I said earlier, like no one's going to care about your project as much as you. And obviously in the past few years, like TikTok is shaking the game up a ton. And at first I'm like, hey, like we were on it a bit. I'd like got busy, took a step back, and I'm like, hey, I'm making really good music. Like that'll get me shows. And like it's just so competitive. There's so many talented people out there, and I'm like, these artists who are like getting TikTok followings and don't have any original music out are getting booked, not me. So kind of like it was like a bit of a rude awakening where it's like you need to play the social media game, and like as much as extra work and like it is for me, and I don't want to do it now. It's like, okay, every week it's like, okay, I'm gonna go crate dig and find like a trending song and like put it with something that's big, and like make sure it's my social media moment for the set. So like opposed to just going in and telling my photographer, it's like, oh, get some cool photos and maybe a cool video moment. Now it's like, hey, we need to get this mashup for like filmed like proper angle from behind me and make sure the lighting's good. Like this is the snippet for like for socials to like highlight for the week to show that we're like A, creating new like mashups all the time, and B, try to trip the algorithm. And not saying that without it, it wouldn't get gigs, but like I think it's important to like you have to like kind of play within the ecosystem unless you're like a massive artist already. But like I'm still considering myself growing and trying to hustle to get bigger gigs. Like for a while, I'm like, oh, like the music will be good, the sets are good, but like you need to play, you need to use everything to your advantage because if you're not, someone else probably is going to, and someone's going to be hungry and is going to want it more than you.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And so something I talk a lot about on the podcast is also branding and just like not just, visual identity of a brand, but really what is just your brand as an artist. I like to say like the music is the soundtrack to the movie. But what else? A lot of people are following artists these days, not just because they have great music and they play great shows, but there's something else about that artist that they're following, right? I got 10 artists I can choose from. Why am I going to follow, this guy or really be a fan of that guy or pay tickets to go see this guy? Like, yes, the music is a big part of it, but I feel like there also is something there, or there should be something else there.
mm-hmm.
From you, like you got the hits, bro. Your fucking music is like cruising on Spotify. You got like tens of millions, hundreds of millions of fucking plays. You got the music, you got the shows and all of that. I'm curious for you, outside of the music and the shows, what else do you bring to your audience? And is that sort of like a conscious decision that you're making too? Like outside of the music, how do you kind of connect with fans?
Yeah. I think as I've matured as an artist more, like I think my visual side was always kind of pretty dialed, like the visual identity, because like in high school, like I loved like art and like I took art class and like I did graphic design. When I was supposed to be in computer science class, I was photoshopping my friends into stupid pictures. So like I was always able to keep the branding on like the visual side pretty dialed, and like I've always feel like my logo's been good, my album artwork's been good. And for a while I thought that was like enough on the branding side, but like kind of coming into this album cycle, like I started to get more, it's maybe like 3 years ago, I found like that's why I kind of realized I'm like, hey, like I really love this throwback genre. It's like it's all what I'm playing in my sets that I love the most. Like, why am I not digging into this? And I think over the years I've had really good productions, but it was kind of like, hey, like here's a trend here, here's a trend here, let me hop on it. And as it become more like leaning into what I really love, I think my songs have gotten even better because like there's a bit more direction behind it, and like now it's like, hey, I want like emotional lyrics, but like emotional lyrics that fit the setting and like have that nostalgic feeling. And that was kind of the first step into that, like kind of more the feeling of my brand. And then I became more vocal about it on social media. And I'm like, hey, like I really love the sound. I want to bring it back. Like if you guys are on board with it, like drop a comment or follow along. We did that maybe like I made a post maybe like 18 or 20 months ago and like talking about I Go Dancing, my song. And it got like crazy, crazy engagement. And I'm like, wow, like there's a bunch of other people that feel this way. And like they're along for the ride. And that kind of inspired me. It's like I should do an album like this. So I think it's about like finding that like what you want the feeling to be. And I think it's more than just the visual side. Like that's more the emotional connection I found that's there. It's like, hey, like this is the emotion I want my music to kind of show. And like back to Dave Risty, who talked about earlier from Palm Tree Records, it's like we were talking about like Forrester, another artist on our label, and like their visuals are like very like naturey and they have this kind of sound. And he's like, we did a branding kind of questionnaire that he did with Forrester before that was effective for them. And it's like, what does Forrester smell like? Which is a really weird question, but for them it's like kind of like earthy, like you're sitting in a forest. Like being able to say these things about your brand, and if you have a brand that can do those things, I think it's super effective. And not like they're very nature oriented. To be looking at an artist like an Millennium, it's like people like you kind of like I don't know exactly what the wording is, but like you know what Millennium shows are going to be like, and everyone that goes to an Millennium show feels the same way. And like even though you are there for the first time and maybe haven't met the people before you, like you all know you're part of like you almost feel like you're part of a community who wants to experience the same emotions together and have the same feelings together. And I think that's where you get into more like the soft points of branding, where it's like I think when you can build that community, and it's still something I'm working on, like because I've really only found I think my real identity in the past 18 months. But like when you can build that, I think that's how you really elevate your brand. But you take that next level, and because I become more vocal about it, like my buddy Audion is doing all these progressive house Never Died shows because he's kind of stuck with the sound. He
Yeah.
reached out to us and he's like, "Hey, like I love what you're like. I love how you're becoming vocal about it. That you're trying to bring the sound back. Like so am I." And then you start to build like a kind of collective. Like he's put me on a bunch of his progressive house Never Died shows,
Cool.
and that's like helped him like have more artists on his shows that like contribute to his brand, but also helps me find kind of like-minded artists and fans that like what I want to be doing. So I feel like once you have like that kind of like that feeling and that emotion around your brand, I think that's like the most valuable thing you can do, right? Like you're trying to make fans that are like-minded to you and like feel like they know you as a person and not just like your music. And I think that as I'm learning that more, it's like helping me connect with fans and develop a fan base and build the brand beyond like, hey, like here's a cool logo or a cool visual, which I think is super, super important.
Well, that's really insightful to me because I think I have been really pushing a lot of my clients around like, hey, figure out like what outside of the music is going to be a part of your brand. But also really like for you, the music and the specific style of music and that throwback and that emotion, like that actually really is becoming the brand, right? Or at least a big significant portion of it. So it's insightful for me too, where it's like, okay, how you're making the music and why you're making the music and what you're making actually really can be the brand as well. It doesn't, for some people, it's like the music is actually a little part of the brand. They're more about like, what's the wild shit that they're, doing online or whatever little gimmick that they're following. But it's cool
that definitely works
that,
for
like,
people. Like you have Diplo or Dylan Francis, and like they have amazing music, but also like people like love them as like individuals because they're quirky. And like I've talked about this with my team a bunch, like oh, like look what these guys are doing, and I'm just not like the kind of person that can like be that goofy. It's just like not in my nature. So I need to find like that more like I went with like the more nostalgic kind of like emotional route. But like there's so many ways you can build that.
Authentic.
But people also like for me, it's authentic to me that I feel this way. For them, that's authentically them being them, and people feel like for like Diplo, people feel like they know Wes or they know Dylan Francis because they're so kind of like forward on socials and show off their personality. They're probably just more extroverted than me, and that's the way their personality is. But like, I think there's so many ways you can go about it. Like that's the way that they have found that works for them to connect to their fans. For me, it's I'm building that emotional connection. And back when not to go back to the album again, but like before I started, I'm like, hey, like what are my 25 like favorite tracks of all time? Like whether it be like an Alesso song or like a Coldplay song or like the One Headlight by like the Wallflowers is on there and stuff where it's like I just like remember and for me I was like, why do I love all these songs? And it's because like I remember a moment when I first heard them and like it's like, hey, like I remember where I was when I heard this, or like this is the memory attached. And I think I want to make those memories for other people. And like that's my way of connecting with fans and showing them like, hey, we experience similar feelings. Because I guess that's the way like I kind of that's my like my emotional love language of making music, maybe, opposed to being quirky and like I don't know. Some people like everyone has a different personality. You need to find what clicks with you and resonates with other people, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I really love that we landed on this idea of authenticity, of doing what is real for you, what feels good for you. You also mentioned how there was a moment where maybe you were kind of like following trends and chasing trends a little bit earlier as you're, finding your sound and developing as an artist. But you did say like you started making stuff that you really loved more at some point. Like you actually really started leaning into what actually like feels good and you're having fun with. And so I think that's such an important part of the process. I see so many artists that get lost because they are just like, all right, well, what's happening in the scene and what's happening in the industry and like let me go make this or make that and while you can become successful at that, you can also really become unfulfilled. And so to keep following the shit that lights you up, it's really cool to see that you've pivoted, really more towards that.
Yeah, it took me a while to become comfortable with that. Like I've definitely done songs that were like I've loved everything I've put out. Like I wouldn't put out something I didn't love, but like I think it's more like knowing what I really want to do. And obviously like everyone says like, oh, I don't care about the streams. Like everyone cares about the streams. Like if I'm putting a single out, I want it to stream well. But for the album, it's like I find because I love everything that's on there for a debut album, and like I'm not looking at my Spotify app every day saying like, oh, how many streams did I get today? And like I feel like it's more about like people like it's more gratifying that people are like, oh, I just listened through this album. Like I love every single track. It's like having those kind of connections is becoming more important for me. And maybe that's as a symptom of me having a lot of streams on stuff, so maybe I become less conscious about it. But like for me, like I really love what I'm doing now, and like I'm doing it for myself, and I'm probably niching down more than what I did before. But I'd rather have like a really solid group of people that love what I'm doing as much as I do, opposed to trying to go after a radio hit. And if that radio hit comes, it's like more of a cherry on top
Yeah.
than like trying to, I don't know, like it's a very like negative emotional cycle if you're just chasing that hit all the time. And if you don't get it, then you get angry with yourself or your management team or your label or your radio promoter. And it's just like not as healthy of a way to develop as an artist. And like, because especially because this ecosystem is so, I don't know, like it's like you're in the spotlight. It's like if you're, I don't know, you need to be happy with what you're doing, or it's going to take a toll on you, like kind of like personally, I feel.
1,000%, man. Well said. And everyone that I know that's ever written a really big hit, they weren't trying to write a really big hit when they wrote it. And then most of them then go try to follow it up by writing a really big hit, and nobody ever writes a big hit because then they're trying. And that's kind of the secret sauce, I think, right? When you're just following like what is fun and what are you enjoying, and that's usually when you're going to make the best shit.
Yeah, like my first ever radio song that like did really well in Canada, like that went like top 10, like my first ever gold record was a song called Heartbreak Back that's like super down tempo. It's like typically for people that don't listen to dance music's like 120 to 130 BPM. Like this song was 88 beats per minute, like super, super slow, super mellow, laid back. And like it just crushed on Canadian radio, like hit number one on BPM in the like in the States, like the dance station, and like no one expected it. And I tried to recreate it a couple times, and everything else flopped. So it's like,
Yeah.
but like I don't know, it's like there's something special about the song. We came out of that session having written the vocal with like it was just like pianos, like in a snap and a vocal, and everyone's like, "Okay, the song's gonna be big," and there was no production behind it yet. Like people just knew. But yeah, I think when you start chasing it, like and over analyzing stuff, and like I fall into that trap too, where it's like, oh, like this like doesn't rhyme perfectly, or it's like it needs to fit this scheme, and like I don't know, I think you just need to sometimes just follow like what feels right in the moment to get stuff. I don't know, like to be happy with it, not necessarily be like, oh, what is radio gonna want? And realistically, if they come back to your radio, they're going to need to edit it anyways to get rid of a build or something. So
Yeah.
you know, no matter how much you try to appease them, they're never going to be happy. So follow what you want to do for yourself.
So you mentioned dropping an album. Origin is the name of the album. Congrats as well for dropping a full album of music. Like that is quite a heavy lift. And I'm curious about what made you decide to put out an album rather than, hey, let's just put out singles for the next year, right? Like, especially in the sort of EDM industry and culture, we're usually more of a singles driven industry. So what made you decide to put out a full album?
I definitely had singles rolling into it. It's not like I just put an album out of the blue. Like there was like 14 tracks, I think 5 were out before. But in the words of Dave Richey at Palm Tree Records, like in today's economy, which is way more singles driven, it was a bold choice to put out an album. Because it's a lot more work for everyone to try to like, I don't know, make sure every song does well and make sure nothing flops. But for me, like I was producing a lot and we weren't able to get music out fast enough. And that was also because like songs like I Go Dancing were like, I don't know, we're like, we wanted to put another single out. It's like, oh, like it's like charting now on dance radio. We need to push it back. So I feel like I wasn't putting enough stuff out. And I was building up this backlog of like music and demos that I had kind of sitting on a hard drive. And in the back of my mind, I'd always wanted to do an album. And makes me it was a bit more than just like going after a single. So you can get like some songs that are a bit more like album songs that are cool and like serve a purpose, but maybe wouldn't stream as well as a single. So I think talking to Dave and the rest of the manager team and Miles, and like we're kind of like, hey, like I think it's time to do one. Like we have like half the album sitting on a hard drive already. Like let's put the other 6 or 7 songs together and make it work. And I think as like kind of like that nostalgic message kind of like came as I was writing more stuff. Like we had a few singles. I'm like, hey, like this is why I love this one. It kind of happened organically. Like I knew I wanted to do an album, but it wasn't like, hey, this is how many tracks it needs to be. Like we didn't have the name of the album until like maybe like a month and a half after it was done. I'm like, hey, like let's figure out the name. It's like Origin. Like I'm going back to kind of my roots, like my origin story for EDM. So
yeah, cool.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily a decision that was like driven by the business side. It was more like, hey, like this is what I want to do. Probably won't stream as well as if they were all singles, but like I think collectively as a package they work well and it's resonating with fans and going well. So yeah, it was kind of like a follow your heart kind of moment. It's like, let's do it. Fuck it. We're putting an album out.
Yeah, good problems to have. I am making so much music and I'm in such a good creative flow and making so much dope shit that I have a lot of stuff to give to the world.
And it's not always like that. Like now I'm after the album cycle, I'm going back to like I feel like the past 4 or 5 months I've just been like, hey, finishing stuff up, like the last bit of polish, mix and master. And now I'm going back in the studio and trying to write stuff fresh again and like trying to go back to like that creative mindset where it's like, hey, like, I'm like writing something from scratch again. It's like I'm kind of like got to return that brain muscle on. Like there's a couple
Mm,
sessions where I'm like, what am I doing here? So not like it's
yeah,
horrible, but like it's not like when you're in that flow of like just producing every day for months and not need to worry about like
yeah,
the more technical side. It definitely is like a muscle you need to keep training. Like if I go back into a studio session to write after not having written for months, it's always like that first hour is kind of like, what am I doing?
yeah,
You need to
yeah.
like turn the brain back on.
And I would say actually you need to turn the heart back on.
For
Because
sure.
do you feel that now that you've dropped the album is sort of the business strategy mindset creeping into the creative process of like, okay, where should I go now that I dropped an album, right? As opposed to like what's fun now and what actually feels good now. Like, is there a little bit of a head game creeping in there for you with your creative process?
I haven't thought of it that way, but probably like I think lyrically I know what I love, and that'll always kind of be that ballady lyric. It's hard for me to break out of that, and like I actually am trying to be like, how do I make something that's more club oriented? That's not like a full
Yeah,
blown like verse,
yeah,
chorus, pre chorus, like properly arranged song because that doesn't work well for clubs sometimes. So I'm trying to break that mold a bit to do some stuff that's a bit more club oriented, but still have my kind of that throwback production feel with like that kind of euphoric
yeah.
leading angle to it. But yeah, it's like I'm not trying to overthink it. Like I think like I'm not like deviating away from the messaging I had on the album because it's what I want to do and it's organic to myself. So I think I'll stay with that. But yeah, it's definitely like it's a good problem to have to go back in the studio and like I don't know. I love making music and it's about touring. It's like it's hard because I've been touring so much lately. It's like I feel like it's
Mm.
hard to come. Sometimes you play a festival and you get super inspired. Sometimes if you're grinding it out, like I had 3 shows in 24 hours last weekend, you come back home and you're trying to sit in the studio on Monday. It's like I nothing's turning up in the brain right now. Like I can't
Oh
like
yeah,
I'm just like exhausted. So I
yeah,
think it's
yeah. You need
important to
to.
block off that time to be creative and let yourself experience I don't know, like I think from the emotional side of writing an album or writing songs, you need to be like emotionally connected to stuff. And it's hard to be kind of in touch emotionally if you're exhausted, I
Totally.
guess.
You know, it's interesting. I talk about this more for like the up and coming artists where you can't just be in the studio all the time. You also got to go live your life and you got to
Mm-hmm.
go have some experiences and fill your cup up so that you have something to talk about, you know? And I haven't really thought about it from this perspective, but if like all you're doing is getting on flights, playing shows, getting in the studio, getting on flights, playing shows, getting in the studio, there's this other piece of it which is like living, you know, just like living and enjoying your life. And I feel like that's such an important thing to tap into, just to fill up your heart and your soul and tap into some of that life force energy to bring back into the studio with you. So I can see how that might be hard sometimes as well.
Yeah, and speaking of those unique experiences that kind of inspire lyrics, like I don't know why it's jumping in my head, but like Chainsmokers Closer, like that like roommate back in Boulder line. Like those are all ones where it's like they rhyme, but like I feel like that had to have been something that was inspired by an actual situation. Like no one's gonna be talking about Boulder, Colorado unless like it's an actual moment, you know?
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
having those real human moments inspires your music. And it's so important to have something that's not just like bland throwaway pop lyrics.
For sure.
And not saying like I'm probably like one of the most cheesy pop lyric DJs around right now, but you have like a really cheesy line, but something really meaty afterwards, where it's like, hey, it's like not just like it's okay that line's cheesy, but here's why it's cheesy, and here's the emotion behind it, and like it's like actually ballady and not just like writing sappy lyrics for the sake of writing a sappy song. It's like there's like
Yeah.
here's why I feel this way, or this is why I'm happy, or this is why I'm sad, or this is why you're feeling this way, opposed to just writing a song for the sake of writing a song.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to go live, have those experiences. I have one more question for you because when I interviewed Dave Rishti, he brought up that branding question about what does your brand smell like? What does your artist project smell like? He mentioned that. I thought that was so funny and so clever. So, what does Frank Walker smell like? Not the human right now sitting there drinking coffee. What's the brand of Frank Walker smell like?
I feel like that's always been such a tough one for me to answer. Like for me, like I was gravitated more to Dave's like, what does it taste like? And for me, it was like a good like kind of like dark chocolates. I mean, it's a bit like bittersweet, like where it's like it leaves you
Mm,
longing, but not like overly too much of a good thing. So it's
okay.
like a bittersweet dark chocolate is kind of like what the brand tastes like. I don't know if that smells like anything. This chocolate doesn't. No, I guess it can kind of smell like that, but that's kind of my answer
Yeah.
there. Like something where
Maybe
it's
like
like
a
something you
mocha,
want.
like a
Yeah,
cafe mocha, warm
yeah.
Starbucks. For, you know?
There's some bitter undertones, but also like a hint of sweetness there. It gives you like I don't know. So you have like that kind of longing for the chocolate, but also the coffee gives you some energy. That's probably a good one. I'm gonna start using that. Thank you for helping me
Yeah.
answer this question.
Yeah.
A
For
cafe
sure, for
mocha.
sure. I think for everyone listening, this is your question for the week. What does your brand smell like? I would love to hear your answers because I'm sure there's some pretty fun smelling brands out there. Here's another question: what does the headliner mindset smell like? I would love to know what y'all think this little brand smells like. But Frank,
Success.
this was super fun. I am so stoked to see you bringing the golden era of 2010s melodic vibes back into the EDM space. That is where I come from. I love that shit. I also love that you are a fellow rugby player brother. That's the beautiful thing about this sport is anytime you meet any other warrior that has gone onto the battlefield, there's like an automatic brotherhood. Just
I may not look
within
like it
that sport.
anymore. I've lost a bit of muscle, but that's from my roots. That's my real
Yeah.
origin story right there, playing rugby.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it. But yo, thank you so much for taking the time to come on today. Really cool to hear about your story and really love what you're up to.
Thanks for having me. Anytime you want me back, I'm down to come back. It's a great chat.
Inside my soul, I don't want you to ever let me go. 'Cause you make me feel like gold.